Good morning. On behalf of our President and CEO, Vicki Spruill, and the entire New England Aquarium community, I'd like to welcome Attorney General Maura Healey and her staff, distinguished invitees, and members of the press to the New England Aquarium as we stand together to protect our oceans and all the human interests that depend on it. My name is John Mandelman. I'm the Vice President and Chief Scientist of our Anderson Cabot Center for Ocean Life, which is committed to conducting urgent conservation science to better understand how human impacts affect our oceans, and more importantly, how to transform that science into conservation action. We also believe strongly that the oceans are a public trust, and we must all strive together to protect these oceans for our present and future generations. Today is a great example of why there is such an urgent need to do this. The oceans are subject to numerous human-induced impacts. There's no doubt that underwater noise, such as that produced by seismic air guns, is hazardous to ocean animals and to ocean health. The magnitude of the proposed seismic surveys we are here to discuss today can be outright lethal and can also induce chronic stress that can badly compromise the long-term health of individual animals and populations. From the tiniest of plankton that so many species in the ocean feed on, to the fish that we feed on, to the largest of the marine mammals that are so vital to ocean health, there is a big impact from underwater noise. If you take a look, which you probably can't from many of your vantage points, the right whale skeleton below. Here at the NEAQ, we've been carefully studying and seeking to protect the North Atlantic right whale for almost 40 years. Referred to by my colleague here, Dr. Scott Krause, as the urban whale, due to the exposure that this species has to so many human-induced impacts. The species is a poster child for cumulative stressors on our oceans. It is among the most endangered whales on the planet, with just over 400 individuals remaining, about 1/4 of them females that breed. Despite almost 50 years of federal protections, the population is now in a free fall. This decline is partially linked to the mortality from entanglements in fishing gear and from vessel collisions. However, it is also due to low calving rates in these females, which are probably reduced because reproductive females are affected by underwater noise, food availability, and other chronic stressors. The airgun noise generated by seismic surveys will have multiple negative impacts on the species, including displacement from critical habitat, masking of mother-calf communications, and elevated stress levels in breeding females. These cumulative effects are likely to reduce body condition and health in all exposed right whales and will have negative effects on reproduction and survival. The efforts currently underway to reduce accidental killing of right whales by ships and fishing gear must be matched with appropriate protections for reproductive females and their calves, both off the mid-Atlantic and the southeastern Atlantic states. Seismic exploration is the first step to eventually allowing offshore oil and gas operations in the U.S. Atlantic. But it is not too late, and solutions are possible. The aquarium stands with the fishing community, businesses, elected officials, and people from Florida to Maine who oppose this and any future actions that threaten our coasts, our economies, and our way of life. We directly need protection. On that note, it is my honor and privilege to introduce the Attorney General for the state of Massachusetts, Maura Healey. Thank you very much.
Good morning, and thank you, John, and thank you to the entire New England Aquarium team for hosting us here today. I'm really happy to be standing with my friend and colleague, New Bedford Mayor John Mitchell. Also with us, Wendy Northcross, President of the Cape Cod Chamber of Commerce, J.J. Bartlet, President of the Fishing Partnership Support Services. We're also joined by Andrew Gottlieb, Executive Director of the Association to Preserve Cape Cod, and Angela Sanfilippo, President of the Gloucester Fishermen's Wives Association. And behind us, somewhere in this pool, lurking, is also our 500-pound friend, Myrtle the Turtle. So look, folks, some of the lawsuits that my office has filed, particularly against the Trump administration, have been pretty complicated. This is not complicated. This is about ensuring that we not see a Deepwater Horizon catastrophe here in this region or anywhere along the Atlantic. Today, my office joined with 9 other states in suing the Trump administration to stop their reckless and illegal plan to conduct blasting tests in Atlantic waters. This is the step towards drilling offshore, part of the Trump administration's plan to open up 90% of the Atlantic seaboard from Maine to Florida for offshore oil and gas exploration, including the waters right off our beautiful coast here in Massachusetts. Now, for more than a year, all of us have stood together to stop this plan. Leaders from the tourism sector, the commercial fishing industry, and a range of environmental advocacy organizations. The facts are clear. This plan is not backed by science, it's not backed by the law, and it's terrible for our economy and our planet. Take our fishing industry, the largest, proudly the largest in the country. It employs nearly 1 million people and brings $7 billion to our economy, a lot of it through the port of New Bedford. The last thing our fishermen and fisheries need is blasting and drilling in the Atlantic waters where they fish. Think about our tourism and hospitality industries, which feature some of the world's most beautiful beaches. All of it would be devastated in the event of a spill. Right now, communities up and down our coast are spending billions of dollars to address flooding and erosion related to climate change. We should be focusing on expanding our clean energy economy, not on expensive, unnecessary, and harmful oil and gas exploration that would lock in decades of dirty and dangerous emissions and put our industries at risk. And of course, we have an obligation to do everything we can to protect our planet for today and for future generations. More than 1 million visitors a year, including generation after generation of young people, come here to the New England Aquarium to learn more about our waters and the incredible animals that live in them. The aquarium reminds us that we share this planet and are responsible for protecting it. There are just 400 North Atlantic right whales left in the world, and this plan will devastate their entire species because offshore drilling will put at risk entire marine ecosystems and the health of our oceans. Massachusetts has been a leader in addressing the real threat of climate change. We're a leader in protecting the long-term health of our fishing industry, and we are committed to doing everything we can to protect our planet. I look forward to continuing to oppose efforts to allow oil and gas drilling anywhere in the Atlantic Ocean and standing with the good people and organizations represented here today. At this time, I'd like to call forward New Bedford's Mayor, John Mitchell, who has been a terrific advocate, not just for his community, but for this industry generally. And I welcome Mayor Mitchell to share his perspective on this action.
Well, thank you, everybody. Let me just begin by stating the obvious. This is the coolest place to hold a press conference, isn't it? And this is amazing. And I anticipate that when a dorsal fin emerges behind me, that'll be the time for me to wrap up my remarks. So I'll get right to it. First, a word of thanks. I really want to thank the Attorney General for her leadership in this area, whether it's in the area of opioid prevention and mitigation, or whether it's fighting for seniors, you name it, she is there fighting for those who need a voice in this state, and this is yet another example. So Maura, thank you for making this happen. I really do appreciate it. I want to thank the New England Aquarium, of course, and in particular for your very conspicuous leadership on the issue of preserving the species that is so dear to this state, the North American right whale. I mean, you guys have been at the forefront of it. I can tell you that the fishing industry, centered in New Bedford, is right there with you. We really are. And I want to thank the conservation community as well. My good friend Angelo would tell you that we're not always on the same side of issues as it relates to the ocean, but when on matters like these, we are shoulder to shoulder with you, and we really appreciate your commitment as well. I come with two related perspectives to offer. Before I was elected to public office, I was an assistant United States attorney here in Boston, and if there were a window right about there, you would be able to see exactly where my office was. And among the things I was responsible for in the office were the prosecution of environmental crimes cases. I prosecuted a number of cases involving oil spills, and including against multinational corporations. And as much as I'm proud of that record, any prosecutor would tell you, and Moore would say it absolutely, we wish we didn't have to prosecute any of those kinds of cases. Because as much as it is important to hold folks accountable who contaminate the environment and our oceans in particular, you can't unring the bell. Once disaster hits, it's really an exercise in cleaning it up and holding folks accountable and prevention in the future, but the damage is already done. And if there's any takeaway from that experience that relates to this, on my part, it is this. It doesn't take that much for disaster to hit. I'll just give you two quick examples. I prosecuted ExxonMobil for an oil spill right here in Boston Harbor in 2006 from the Everett terminal. And that spilled thousands of gallons into Boston Harbor and contaminated shorelines and did damage. And all it was a 2-inch coupling that failed that people weren't inspecting, and it failed and spilled over the course of days into the harbor and made a mess, and we had to deal with it later. The Buzzards Bay Oil Spill in 2003, another case in which there was far more damage done. That was a matter of a guy driving a tugboat and saying, I'm just going to go in the back for a minute and have a cigarette, right? And we veered off course on a clear day, and that 98,000 gallons of bunker oil spilled up and down the East Coast, up and down the coast of Buzzards Bay, and soiled shellfish beds and killed countless migratory birds and made a huge, huge mess. Those messes affect people's lives. And now, as the mayor of New Bedford, the largest by far commercial fishing port in the country, you can see it's clear as a bell to me the risks that oil spills pose. We have, in New Bedford, we've had instances where there have been natural disasters and that have affected fisheries directly, but when they affect the fisheries, they affect families. And that's what we're talking about today, the livelihoods of fishermen and those who support fishermen on the shore side and processors up and down our docks and those in other seaports along the coast hinge on the ability of fishermen to bring back a product that is sellable. And when it's sullied by oil or it's not there because it's dead, those families suffer. And those families deserve an opportunity, like everybody else, to provide for themselves, to give their kids an opportunity to pursue the American dream and otherwise live the good life. That's what this is really about. That's what the Attorney General's effort is about, as well as all the other attorneys general around the country that are involved in this lawsuit. And I stand here today proud to support their efforts. It is the right one at the right time. The Trump administration is taking a step down a very dangerous path, and we will make sure that we stand in the way. Thank you very much, everybody.
And now we welcome J.J. Bartlet, President of the Fishing Partnership Support Services.
Thank you. Good morning. We represent 20,000 fishing families. We improve the health, safety, and economic security of 20,000 fishing families. And sadly, we know the devastating impact that oil spills have on fishing communities. Spikes in divorce, depression, anxiety, and post-traumatic stress disorder were evident for years after the disasters in Alaska and down in the Gulf of Mexico. We cannot afford to risk the tens of thousands of local jobs in the multi-billion-dollar seafood industry here in Massachusetts, and we certainly cannot risk destroying the families who feed us. Thank you to the Attorney General for taking this on, and we really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, JJ. And thanks for the work you do in supporting our fishing families. Speaking of fishing families, I'd like to introduce now Angela Sanfilippo, President of the Gloucester Fishermen Wives Association.
Good morning, everyone, and I sincerely want to thank Maura for having this press conference and the aquarium for hosting us. What to say about today? I was telling Mayor Mitchell that it's 40 years to the day when, after 10 years of fighting, we had a moratorium for North Atlantic. There would be nothing happen. It was a fight that we fought with all our courage and with all our strength. With the most concern as much as to the fishing community, but to the ocean. Because when there is no healthy ocean, there is no fishing communities. We are very disappointed from the Trump administration, what they're trying to do, and very disappointed that National Marine Fisheries, which is the Department of Commerce, is going along with this exploitation of the ocean. I just want to tell you that JJ spoke about the destruction in the family. After the BP oil spill in New Orleans and that area, I was invited to go down. The following spring, I was invited to go down and to meet with the fishing family and the people that had been affected by the oil spill down the Gulf of Mexico. It was a total disaster. 97% rate in divorce, sickness, people with terrible rashes in their arms and in their body. Since then, many people that I visit with who were part of that cleanup, they're gone, they're dead. And I remember when that happened, somebody called me from Alaska and said, Angela, be careful. Make sure that none of the fishing people from up north go down to the Gulf to help clean up. Because all the fishing people that helped clean up the Valdez oil spill in Alaska, they're all dead. Nobody ever got a penny for what they did. And I can tell you sadly, that only one person from Gloucester went to clean out the oil spill. That person died 2 years ago. So we know what this all means. We have worked very hard for the last 40 years to protect the environment, to allow stock to rebound. A lot of the Northwest Atlantic is shut down to fishing because we're going to allow the fish to come back, and we can simply open the doors for oil drilling and gas exploration in the Northwest Atlantic. And the last thing I want to tell you is that it was that year, 88, a member of the Department of Interior, and I still remember his name, Frank Bazil, here in Massachusetts at a meeting said, we are leaving and we are not coming back until all of you are gone. Well, I have a word for the Department of Interior. We are still here and we're going to keep fighting. Thank you.
Thank you, Angela. Thank you, Angela, and thank you for putting a human face on this, because this is serious, this is real. It's about protecting our oceans, it's about protecting our planets, it's about protecting one another. And I think the stories that you just heard from Angela about the real and devastating impact on human lives following examples of oil spills in Alaska and down the Gulf, or why exactly we're taking this action today, joined by states up and down the Atlantic seaboard. At this time, I want to invite Wendy Northcrest to join us. Wendy is the CEO of the Cape Cod Chamber of Commerce.
It's going to be a hard act to follow. So I represent a $1.2 billion visitor industry on Cape Cod. I also represent an equally robust healthcare system on Cape Cod that caters to a very predominant age demographic of retirees. Every one of us have chosen to be on Cape Cod. We've chosen to live there because of our proximity to the water. And while some of us don't earn our living from being in the water, without our coastline, we have no economy on Cape Cod. Over the last 20 years, I've become exquisitely familiar with how our economy works If we don't have a clean environment, I have no economy. I have nothing to sell on Cape Cod. So while we stand here today in full support of this action, we also pledge to consistently work to keep our water clean, both our fresh water and our salt water, the coastal water and the ponds. We're working very hard on wastewater so that we don't introduce more harmful elements into our embayments and our sounds. Nearly a century ago, the Cape Cod Chamber was formed to help Cape Codders find a way of life. We're very remotely geographically isolated. It's not easy to find a way of living on Cape Cod, but with travel and tourism and now retirement, our property values are very strong. We're a safe investment. If we had a massive oil spill and the loss of property values on Cape Cod, every homeowner would be devastated. There would be no jobs. So we stand here today with these colleagues to pledge our support, to continue to do everything that we can to keep our oceans safe and clean and viable for future generations. Thank you.
Thank you.